Okay, guys, we are back with Shakespeare class. Spring break. I know I tried to observe spring break in kind of a weird way. I don't know if that fully worked, but I did sort of observe spring break, but I didn't put any videos up during spring break. I did put some videos up Friday, but not for you guys, so it's been slightly longer since you've heard from me. Um, we're going to continue with Romeo and Juliet. Before we do that, I am going to put on the blog very soon, today or tomorrow, I think, some information about how to declare the class um, credit, no credit, aka pass fail. The university's released a kind of lengthy, frequently asked questions, answering all your questions about credit, no credit, otherwise known as pass fail. My basic piece of advice is this: if you're happy with the grade you got on, if you turned in paper 1 and you're happy with the grade you got on it, and you think you can get paper 2 done early enough that you'll be turning in a second draft on May 14th, then I would go ahead and just get your grade. But if you feel like that's going to be a problem, or you're not doing your best work, because not your fault, by the way, crazy time to be alive. This is certainly one of the craziest things I've ever been through. It's nuts. Maybe the craziest. I mean, I was alive for September 11th, but I wasn't in New York at the time. But bad stuff's going on. So I would recommend that you declare your classes credit, no credit, or AKA pass fail, unless you're particularly happy with how your grades have been going in this class so far, and you think you could turn paper 2 in early enough that you'll have time to do a revision on it before May 14th. Okay. Remember, paper 2, by the way, it's just like paper 1. Except that you may pick a different Shakespeare play to write about. If the first paper was pick a Shakespeare play and compare it to a recent story, and the paper 2 is just pick a different Shakespeare play and compare it to a different recent story. Can you do the same Shakespeare play? Yes, with different stories. Can you do the same Shakespeare play and the same story? You could just keep going, make a 10-page paper total by the end of the semester. There's lots of variations on this, but the basic idea is I need 10 pages from you by the end of the semester comparing a Shakespeare play to some kind of recent kind of thing. And there's a lot of tips and tricks for how to do well on these things in the syllabus. I really recommend you take a look at the syllabus and look at the sample paper and the advice in there that I have for you. People who get D's and F's, they either don't turn it in or they plagiarize. Do not fucking plagiarize, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and I have very little patience for that kind of nonsense right now. Or they don't follow the instructions. So take a look at the instructions and take a look at the tips and the suggestions and stuff on there. Just so I want to make sure I don't get a paper comparing Hamlet to The Lion King. Don't do that. You want to try to work with one of the plays that we went over in the course. And when you do that, try to when you do that, try to show that you learned something from being in class. You watch these videos. Can you use these videos to kind of help you out? Okay, cool. Let's go forward. Romeo and Juliet. Oh, yeah, in 2 papers by the end of the semester, but you know that. And I think that's it. Comment on the blog. Make comments. Let me know you're alive out there in TV land. Okay, so let's go Romeo and Juliet. I'm on page 9 of Romeo and Juliet, and I want to keep going with it. So let's take a look at Romeo and Juliet. This is the famous balcony scene. Romeo has met Juliet at the party, and the party is over, and Juliet has gone back to her bedroom, and Romeo is supposed to be with his friends, Mercutio and Benvolio. And we went over there kind of yelling for Romeo to show up, but Romeo doesn't do that. Romeo climbs the walls and enters the garden, because he wants to get another glimpse of Juliet, who's up in her bedroom, and she turns on the light, and she's on the balcony. And this is the famous scene where Romeo is down below, and Juliet is way up high on a balcony, sort of like this. Here's a balcony up there, so Juliet would be up there, and I'd be Romeo down here below. So Romeo, he on the top of page 9, the first thing about Romeo is he shows up and he speaks all this beautiful sort of poetry about Juliet and how lovely she is and how her eyes are like stars and how her face is so bright and beautiful that that it would light up the night sky. It's a lot of cheesy, dopey, silly, standard, normal poetry shit that men say about women. Romeo is a little bit of a cliche. He is a little bit, he says things people in love say. But he hasn't actually, and he spoke to her briefly at the party, but he hasn't spoken to her yet in the balcony. She doesn't know he's there yet. He's sort of spying on her. But she goes to her window and she says, "I'm me," meaning she's like feeling sad, like, oh boy, I feel, something big is happening to her. she met Romeo. So she says, I, me. This is the first thing. Yeah, here's a famous one. Romeo says that I wish I was a glove that I might touch that cheek. That's a very famous thing to say in poems, is you, the beautiful woman that you love has a glove, and you wish you were the glove because the glove gets to touch her beautiful skin, and you wish you could touch her beautiful skin. Romeo is doing all the standard, normal poetry shit that people in love do back in Shakespeare's day. So Juliet begins speaking, and Romeo is so excited when she speaks, although she can't hear him yet. He's sort of just talking to himself. She speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel. Again, calling the person you love an angel is pretty normal for this kind of situation. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night, being o'er my head as is a winged messenger of the heaven, unto the white upturned wondering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him when he bestrides the lazy puffing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air. Again, normal poetry stuff. He says, you're so beautiful to this night as a winged messenger of heaven. Is to normal people, the white upturned wondering eyes of mortals. So basically, it's a metaphor, standard metaphor. Romeo is saying, oh, speak again, Juliet. You are to me what an angel is to any other normal person. You are like my angel. Again, pretty boring, unusual stuff. But then Romeo gets a little bit of a surprise. Because Romeo is thinking and speaking about her. He's desperately in love with her. He's saying all these sort of poetry things about how much he loves her. Well, it turns out that Juliet was also thinking about him. Apparently, when they met, he fell in love with her. She fell in love with him. It's love at first sight. Juliet begins. So Juliet, he's down below and she's up above. She doesn't know he's there yet. So she's essentially talking to herself about Romeo, but Romeo is overhearing her. And here we got these famous lines: Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Now here I have to stop and do a big thing. It's not that big actually, but it's funny. These are very some Shakespeare has these lines that are so famous that everybody knows them. To be or not to be, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. Double, double, toil and trouble. These are Shakespeare lines. People know they don't always know what they mean, but they've heard them before because Shakespeare is quite famous. Okay. What a piece of work is man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, and form and moving, how express and admirable in apprehension, blah, blah, blah. So people know these lines. Well, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo, is one of the most famous lines in all of Shakespeare, because it's really the beginning of the most famous. People love love scenes. People love love stories. And Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo is famous because it's the beginning of one of the most romantic scenes in all of Shakespeare. So it shows up on all kinds of TV shows and stuff too. You'll see characters are going to be in a play. The play is Romeo and Juliet, and that's the one part of rehearsal they show you is Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Now this upsets a lot of my students. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Really sounds like it means Romeo, Romeo, where are you? Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Because wherefore sounds like where. And she doesn't know where he is. So it makes sense that she'd be saying, Romeo, Romeo, where are you, Romeo? What she actually says is, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? And here's the part that's upsetting. Wherefore does not mean where. She is not asking where he is. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Wherefore, confusingly, this is old-fashioned English that is unusual to us. Wherefore does not mean where. Wherefore means why. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo does not mean Romeo, Romeo, where the hell are you? It means Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? She wants to know, Romeo, Romeo, why is your name Romeo? Why are you called that? And really, it's not just the first name. She doesn't care what his first name is. The problem is that his last name, Montague, Juliet is a Capulet, Romeo is a Montague. These are two separate families. They are at war with each other. And she's saying, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Like, Romeo, I wish you didn't have your name, because if you had your name, it would be so easy to love you. But why do you have to have the name Montague from one of my family's greatest enemies? This makes it very difficult to love you. And those are Juliet's sort of opening words in the balcony scene. I'll catch you in the next video.